The only thing that separates doers from dreamers is action. The reason that I affirm this to be true is that I've spent my life working with people who were told that their ambitions weren't attainable. These outliers sought out to make their dreams happen nevertheless. Individuals like myself were successful in spite of the cultural bias against them. I'm a participant of that way of life, which is why I'm standing on this stage, covered in tattoos, and looking much less like the average TED presenter. My business model came from my experience with punk and hardcore bands. The thing that has made that genre so successful is the do-it-yourself ethic. Way before the YouTube DIY craze captivated the world, we were booking our own bands, making flyers, printing merch, and even cooking dinner as kids for touring punk bands. You see, we couldn't afford to do it any other way. We had to teach ourselves how to do all these things. We learned from others that came before us, or we did our homework. But more importantly, we just did it. We lived like we had nothing to lose. Every time we did something, if it worked, it worked. If it didn't and we failed miserably, we still tried again. We took bigger and even larger risks the next time. The current climate of DIY has evolved into a worldwide phenomenon, which is crazy. I never imagined this would happen. Where we're at right now is the hopeful handyman, the home chef, the baker. They're all taking cues from this DIY. So, as they look at this process, they've continued to work and work and work, and the world has taken on the ability to learn about savings, about fixing things, about doing things for themselves by looking on the internet. I'm here to tell you that's not enough. DIY can fix your life. DIY can jumpstart your business. DIY can even keep you climbing the corporate ladder. But let me tell you my story. We'll start at the start. But what? Oh, that's not where I wanted. Mom, did you put these in here? We're not going to go back that far. We're actually not going to go back that far, even though the jean jacket years were pretty formidable on my life. They changed a lot of things. To me, DIY meant freedom. In my mind, DIY meant complete self-reliance. No one was able to stop me, because when you're doing things for yourself, you're the boss, right? No one can say, hey, here's what you need to do. Well, I'm making my own rules, and that's my favorite thing about DIY. I got to set every rule, and every single thing I did, I set the rules, I set the deadlines, I set the budgets. I started my venture into DIY business by evaluating what I was doing with my punk ideologies. Using the free thought and nonconformity values that I had, I looked at my plan and I structured so I could exist in the margins. I didn't want to work a corporate job. That's what I was leaving. That's what the DIY ethic was taking me out of. I refused to be just like everyone else. With the decision to do everything I could for myself, DIY was taking me to completely new heights. So, it was time to raise some money. You got to have capital for a business, right? Jake didn't visit a bank. Young Jake Farris didn't take out a loan. Young Jake Farris became a power seller. So what you do, what I did, you guys can try, you can play along at home if you want, but what I did is I took everything that was non-essential in my life and I sold it. And this is long before Craigslist. This is long before Facebook Marketplace. You know, I feel like anything I have in my home, I could put on Facebook Marketplace and have someone picking it up this afternoon. This was eBay. You put it on, and you get whatever someone's willing to pay for it. You know what I mean? You're like, oh man, I got this comic book. It's going to be worth $100. You put it on the internet, and it sells for $8.55. But guess what? I realized that I was capable of getting rid of everything, and the possibility of what could be in my life completely outweighed the perceived value of keeping my possessions. At that point, possessions seemed like nothing to me. So as we moved on, there was no advertising budget. I discovered that just because there was no money, that didn't mean that it couldn't be done. I spent my time learning how to advertise without absolutely any money. There was no capital. But guess what? I maximized social media exposure. You guys remember MySpace? I was really, really, really good at it. Like really good at MySpace. So Associated Press actually ran a pretty big article about MySpace and business with me several years ago when MySpace was actually still a thing, because not very many businesses were actually getting on MySpace at the time. So I realized that I could set up a MySpace account, and instead of putting Jake for my first name, I could put Studio, which is the name of first part of my business. And then for last name, I put 13. And all of a sudden now, my business is a person. It's evolved. So what I did is I took every opportunity I could. I maximized all the social media exposure. I used all the free tools that I could find online. I hand-printed flyers and business cards, and I sent them with droves of kids out to local festivals. Anywhere you would go in Fort Wayne at this time, my business cards and flyers were there. I also thought back to my days of hanging rock posters for shows. So I started going out at night and wheat pasting advertisements for my business. If you guys aren't familiar with wheat pasting, one, it's illegal. Two, it's very, very messy. It's kind of like, and most of you probably have never done this because wallpaper really isn't a thing anymore, but it's like hanging wallpaper, kind of. You put down a base coat, you roll it onto the wall, you know. What we were using is big push brooms, basically, so you mop it onto what you want to mop it onto, and then you put it up there, but then you mop over it too because it's clear, because you want to seal it, so you want to make sure that it stays on there. So I would spend my overnight hours, and I'm talking late night, 24-hour Kinko, shout out, they really hooked me up, blowing up my artwork. So I'd go to the self-service printer because, one, that kept you from getting caught. Because if you go to the desk and you say, hey, can you make 30 copies of this, but I need it 8x8, they go, you know, and they start to wonder. So then when someone sees it, or someone, maybe the authorities, call Kinko's and they say, have you made copies of anything that was 8 foot by 8 foot lately that might have said this? They go, oh yeah, I know that guy. So anyway, I was doing it low key. I did it by myself. And I would blow up the artwork. It's basically the same approach as billboard advertising, I thought. You know, I was like, well, this is free billboard advertising. So I know sneaking around at night, doing guerrilla marketing is probably not on everyone's business plan. And a lot of your corporate jobs, you write that on your business plan, they're probably going to have something to say to you. But nonetheless, I was sneaking around doing a little guerrilla marketing, and I was making these raggedy old billboards look nicer anyway. I wasn't putting it over things that I shouldn't. I found billboards that everything was falling off of them, and guess what? My ad went up. As my business grew, so did my knowledge. I painted our new location. We pulled up the carpet and laid the tile. We found every bit of knowledge we needed to remodel and move into our new home. Even though my skill set was growing, I still went back to what I knew when things got hard. It was time to do homework again. I would spend night after night on the internet reading other people's business plans, because guess what? I had no idea how to write a business plan. So I'd read everyone else's business plans about how they moved their business. So you do your homework, figure those things out. Once my business was headed in the right direction, I focused on myself. It had been brought to my attention that my do-it-yourself mentality could be applied to my own well-being. When that first came up, I went, oh man, I am not a doctor. This is probably not a good idea. You're like, DIY psychiatry, huh? Well, guess what? I still gave it a shot. So I was like, there's no way that I can DIY psychiatry once I really thought about it. In retrospect, I was completely wrong. There were definitely things that I was able to take into my own hands that made significant changes on my life, that made significant changes on my personal life, on my professional life, and my own well-being. There were two things that I did on my own that made the biggest major changes for me. First, I started meditating with focus. Did you guys know there's different ways to meditate? I had literally no idea. I thought meditating was this. In a quiet place and like emptying everything out of your mind. Well, my mom can tell you this. My brain never shuts down. I never quit talking. I never quit thinking. I cannot clear my mind completely. I've tried. So instead, I found out what made the most sense for me. And that was taking one idea, focusing on it, and letting that idea grow and evolve in my mind. Also, if you've never tried float pods, I seriously suggest it. Get yourself in one. It's super, super awesome and worth your time. Secondly, I started scheduling my worry time. I know this sounds super strange to some people. I'm like, no joke. I scheduled my worry time. Once a day, I sit down, and what I do is I think, and I write down the things that worry me. I know it sounds, this is weird. If you've never done this, when I first heard about it, I was like, this is strange. During the rest of the day, though, when my worries pop into my head, I remind myself that my worries have an appointment, and that appointment's not till later in the day, or that appointment's not till tomorrow morning. So you just push them away. And I know it takes a while to get to that. And when that first evolved for me, I spent a lot of time still struggling with it day to day. But as you do it and repeat it, now I do this once a week. Sometimes I do it less than once a week. People run into me and they're like, man, Jake is so carefree. For the first time actually this week, my wife said, I've never heard you say you were stressed out. And I said it to her. I was practicing. I was like learning my TED talk, I was like, oh, I am stressed. And she's like, I've never heard you say that. So putting worries into the right place and making them where they belong has made a very significant impact for me. But eventually, it just came to me that my DIY ethic was fundamentally what a lot of other people were just calling hard work. Punk rock had instilled a work ethic in me that was unparalleled by my competitors. I knew to keep up with my cohorts, it required a lot of me. But to me, that just seemed like business as usual. My family, my friends, they looked at it a little bit differently. Those people asked, they said, hey, why do you work so much? You ever going to take a day off? What are you doing? And more oftenly, they asked me if I was just crazy. Well, the answer probably was yes. But here it is. Here's what it took me 15 years to actually get to. I realized that my major takeaway from DIY culture is that the idea of doing things for yourself is actually not lonely. I imagined when I first started this that DIY was total and complete self-reliance, that it was all about me. And that seemed fun to me because I made the rules, I did all the things. But guess what? I was wrong. Doing things for yourself is completely about community. It's the exact opposite. When you don't know what to do, or you don't know how to do things, or you don't have the money for it, it's okay to ask. You have to learn to accept that when you take a risk and you ask for something, that no is not the end of the world. When someone tells you no when you ask for something, that's not the end of the line. Guess what? There's more people to ask. People are plentiful. So, here's how this went down. I decided that I was going to start asking for things. Once I realized that asking was what really was making DIY work for me, I was like, I'm going to get better at this. So I wanted to start small. So I started like really, really small, guys. Are you ready for this? I was in the grocery line, and even though I was shot down, I was going to keep trying. So what I did is I walk in the grocery store, and I say, hey guys, do you mind if I cut the line real quick? And a little old lady turns around slowly. Well, no, little lady turns around very slowly, and she looks at me. She says, honey, wait your turn. I knew that wasn't the end of the road, though. I'm ready to keep playing. So I'm ordering lunch. The guy looks at me and goes, hey, guac's extra. I said, I know guac's extra, bud. How about today it's not? He looked at me even firmer than the little old lady and says, guacamole is always extra, sir. But asking's also gone in my favor. Sometimes small, sometimes big time. I've gotten to try foods at restaurants before I've committed to pay for them. I've crashed on friends' couches or strangers' couches without paying for a hotel room. More importantly, when I do book hotel rooms, sometimes I ask and receive significant upgrades. That's the Temple of Zeus out my window. That was pretty sweet. I found myself in Las Vegas shuffling with 2011's favorite party rockers. You may have remembered them. That's me. That's also Barry Gordy, the fourth in the background there, holding his drink. Pretty sweet. Found tickets and scored tickets to sold-out World Series games. Thanks, Trisha. Even spent some time hanging out, laughing, enjoying myself with the baddest man on the planet. Ended up backstage, meeting people I thought were completely unreachable. I've even been given jobs that I wasn't qualified for. Sorry, Ed Smith. I even got invited to do a TED Talk, all because I asked. So here's what you can do to put this into action. There's 2 ways to play along at home. First, you can play the rejection game. This can actually be a lot of fun. Your goal is to set out and ask for something that you know that the answer is going to be no to. Seems easy enough, right? So we're going to play that cashier game again. You walk up to the cashier, you take a look at her, and you say, hey, you got any coupons or like a discount code that can save me a few bucks? Or you're going out to eat. You ask the waiter for something that you know is not on the menu. Hey, bud, you got anything with rutabagas in it? Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's funny. Don't ask them for rutabagas unless you're ready to eat them. So maybe you look and you're like, I don't see any chocolate cake on the menu. Do you have chocolate cake? Because guess what? Sometimes you might get yeah, we do actually. This one's even better. Pick up the phone, call your credit card company, and ask them to lower your interest rate. Say, hey, it looks like we're at like 21% on this card. Can we get down to about 6.5? Or when we're done today, walk out here, go on the street. Next time that you have an interaction with someone, ask someone to borrow $100. Hey, dude. Do we still say dude? Hey, dude, got an extra hundo I can get? Both of these are probably going to be met with resounding no's. The exercise, though, is going to teach you that it's okay to hear no. No's not the end of the world. It's all right. Ultimately, you're going to become more comfortable asking for things, and someone might just say yes. The next step is to start asking for the things you need. For some reason, people find this completely difficult. Truthfully, this is way easier than the rejection game. Seek out someone that has the knowledge that you need and ask them to help you. There's 4 magic words. Can you help me? It's really that easy. To practice this, take a look at your personal life, your professional life, or your own personal well-being. Find something that you're not good at. Take a look around this room. Take a look around the next networking event you're at. Take a look through your Rolodex. You guys have Rolodexes? Spin your Rolodex. Take a look and find the person that's good at what you're bad at and ask them, can you help me? Seems easy enough, right, guys? Say it with me one time then. Can you help me? All right, I'm going to leave you guys with one last story. It's about a man named Steve Jobs. You might have heard of him, right? We're not talking about that Steve Jobs, though. We're talking about teenage Steve Jobs. He's a little different. Well, young Steve wanted to build a frequency counter. I'm sure most of you young geniuses wanted to do that as well, right? So, Steve didn't have the parts and the access to what he needed to build this frequency counter. So what Steve does is he picks up the phone book and he looks up a Mr. Bill Hewlett. Because that's what you did actually in the 70s, is you picked up a book and you would find people's phone numbers in it. But more importantly, there's like geniuses in the phone book and millionaires are still in the phone book. He's not unlisted. If you don't know who Bill Hewlett is, he's the H in what would end up being the world's leading computer manufacturer. He's the dude whose company gets $90 every time you need ink cartridges. Well, Steve picks up the phone and he calls Mr. Hewlett. And the conversation goes a little something like this. Hey, Mr. Hewlett, my name's Steve Jobs. I'm a high school student, and I need the parts to build a frequency counter. I know you have those. Can you help me? That moment not only gathered the parts needed, but it also led Steve Jobs to a summer internship working for Bill Hewlett. All the success that would follow Steve stemmed from that moment. The only thing that Steve Jobs did was ask. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. That's what separates the people that do things from the people that just dream about them. You have got to act. Thank you.